2 years had passed since that summer night when Marcus was arrested outside the Italian restaurant. Now he stood in a federal courthouse, wearing another expensive suit, but this time he felt proud instead of scared. Today was the day Morrison and Phillips would learn their punishment. The courtroom was packed with people. Reporters sat in the front rows with their notebooks and cameras. Behind them were community activists, other victims of police misconduct, and Marcus's family and friends. Marcus sat next to Linda Carter, who had fought for him from the beginning. Judge Elizabeth Martinez was known for being tough on police officers who broke the law. She was a small woman with short black hair and serious dark eyes. She had been a prosecutor before becoming a judge, and she understood how much damage corrupt police officers could cause. Morrison and Phillips sat at the defendant's table with their lawyers. Both men looked very different from the confident officers who had arrested Marcus 2 years ago. Morrison had lost weight, and his hair had turned completely gray. Phillips looked even worse. He was thin and nervous, constantly looking around. The courtroom like a scared animal. The FBI investigation had uncovered much more than anyone expected. Morrison had been corrupt for most of his 15-year career. He had taken money from drug dealers, planted evidence on innocent people, and targeted black men for arrests to boost his statistics. Phillips had learned these criminal methods from Morrison and had helped cover up the crimes. In total, Morrison was found guilty of violating the civil rights of 22 people. Phillips was convicted of helping Morrison in 15 of those cases. Both men had also been found guilty of lying under oath, filing false reports, and conspiracy to deny people their constitutional rights. Judge Martinez looked at the two former officers with disgust. Detective Morrison and Officer Phillips, you took an oath to protect and serve all citizens equally. Instead, you used your badges and guns to hurt innocent people. You are criminals who happen to wear police uniforms. She continued, the evidence shows that you targeted black men because of your racist beliefs. You arrested people who had committed no crimes. You lied in your reports and in court testimony. You destroyed lives and careers for your own entertainment and prejudice. Morrison tried to interrupt, but Judge Martinez silenced him with a stern look. Detective Morrison, you are sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Officer Phillips, you are sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. Both of you are banned from working in law enforcement anywhere in the United States for the rest of your lives. You will also lose your police pensions and benefits. Phillips started crying when he heard his sentence. His wife and children were sitting in the courtroom, and they were crying too. Morrison just stared straight ahead, showing no emotion. He had always believed he was above the law, and even now he couldn't accept that he was being punished. After the sentencing, Marcus stood outside the courthouse and spoke to the reporters. He had learned to be comfortable with cameras and microphones. His experience had taught him that speaking out was important for creating change. Today, justice was served, Marcus said. But this victory belongs to everyone who has been hurt by police officers who think they are above the law. Morrison and Phillips will go to prison, but the fight for police accountability must continue. Marcus had used the settlement money from his lawsuit against the city to start the Marcus Johnson Foundation for Police Accountability. The foundation provided lawyers for people who couldn't afford to fight police misconduct. They also worked to change laws and train police officers about civil rights. Commissioner Samuel Johnson had transformed the Chicago Police Department over the past 2 years. He had fired 37 officers for corruption or misconduct. He had promoted honest officers who cared about serving the community fairly. He had also implemented new training programs that taught officers about unconscious bias and community policing. The changes were working. Complaints against police officers had dropped by 60%. Crime was also down because people in the community were were more willing to cooperate with police officers they trusted. Commissioner Johnson had proved that good policing and police accountability could work together. Marcus had returned to work at Meridian Financial Group 6 months after his arrest. His boss, Mr. Stone, had apologized and promoted him to senior vice president. Marcus's clients had stayed loyal to him, and his career was better than ever. But the experience had changed him in important ways. Every month, Marcus visited schools and community centers to tell his story. He talked to young black men about their rights when dealing with police officers. He also spoke at police academies, helping train new officers about the importance of treating all citizens with respect. Remember, Marcus would tell the young police recruits, every person you meet on the street is someone's son, daughter, mother, or father. They deserve to be treated with dignity, no matter what they look like or how much money they have. The security camera video from Tony's restaurant had become famous. It was now used in police training programs across the country as an example of how not to police. The video showed clearly how racism and prejudice could turn police officers into criminals. Morrison served 4.5 years in prison before being released on parole. He moved to a small town where nobody knew his history and worked at a gas station. He never apologized to Marcus or any of his other victims. Some people never learn from their mistakes. Phillips was released after serving 2 years. Unlike Morrison, Phillips understood that he had done terrible things. He wrote a letter to Marcus, apologizing for his actions. He also testified before Congress about police corruption, helping lawmakers write new laws to prevent police misconduct. Commissioner Johnson continued leading the police department for 5 more years. When he retired, Chicago had one of the most respected police departments in the country. Other cities asked him to help them reform their own police departments. Marcus kept the BMW that had started all his troubles. Sometimes he would drive past the Italian restaurant where everything began. Tony Rossi always waved at him from the window. The security camera that had saved Marcus's life was still there. Watching over the street. The story of Marcus Johnson became a symbol of hope for people fighting police corruption across America. It showed that even when the system fails, justice is still possible if people are willing to fight for it. It also proved that sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up giving you the power to change the world. Marcus often thought about that night when he was handcuffed and put in the police car. He had felt hopeless and alone, thinking his life was ruined. He never could have imagined that 2 years later, he would be running a foundation that helped other victims of police misconduct, while the officers who arrested him were sitting in prison cells. The lesson was clear. In America, the arc of justice is long, but it does bend toward fairness when good people refuse to give up the fight. Marcus Johnson had proved that truth and persistence could overcome lies and corruption, even when the odds seemed impossible. 6 months after that terrible night outside the restaurant, Marcus sat in his living room watching the news. The reporter on television was announcing something that would change everything. Mayor Patricia Williams was standing at a podium, surrounded by city officials and community leaders. Today, I am proud to announce that Judge Samuel Johnson will be our new police commissioner, the mayor said. Judge Johnson has spent 30 years fighting for justice and civil rights. He is exactly the leader our police department needs. Marcus felt his heart racing as he watched his uncle accept the position. Samuel Johnson was a tall, dignified man with gray hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He had been Marcus's hero since childhood. Now, Uncle Samuel would be in charge of the entire Chicago Police Department, including Morrison and Phillips. Judge Johnson stepped up to the microphone. His voice was strong and clear. I accept this position with the understanding that we must rebuild trust between the police and the community. Too many innocent people have been hurt by officers who abuse their power. That ends now. The new police commissioner's first day at work was unlike anything the department had ever seen before. Samuel Johnson arrived at headquarters early in the morning, wearing a crisp blue suit and carrying a briefcase full of files. Word had spread quickly through the building that the new boss was the uncle of the man Morrison and Phillips had falsely arrested. Morrison was sitting at his desk when he got the call to report to the commissioner's office. His hands were shaking as he walked down the hallway. Other officers stared at him as he passed. Everyone knew what was coming. Phillips was already waiting outside the commissioner's office when Morrison arrived. The younger officer looked sick with worry. His face was pale, and sweat was dripping down his forehead, even though the building was air-conditioned. Commissioner Johnson's office was large and impressive, with tall windows and wooden furniture. Behind his desk hung pictures of civil rights, leaders, and quotes about justice. When Morrison and Phillips entered, they found the commissioner sitting calmly, reading their personnel files. "Sit down," Commissioner Johnson said, without looking up from the papers. His voice was quiet but firm. Both officers sat down in the chairs across from his desk, waiting nervously for him to speak. Commissioner Johnson finally looked up at them with cold, angry eyes. "I have spent the morning reading about your careers. What I found disgusts me." He opened Morrison's file and began reading. "Detective Morrison, in the past 5 years, you have arrested 23 black men on charges that were later dropped or dismissed. You have received 47 complaints for excessive force and racial discrimination. Yet somehow, you have never been disciplined." Morrison tried to speak, but Commissioner Johnson held up his hand for silence. "Officer Phillips, you have been Morrison's partner for 2 years. During that time, you have participated in 12 questionable arrests. You have learned to lie in your reports and to cover up your partner's crimes." Phillips started crying. "Sir, I was just following orders. Morrison is my senior partner. I thought I was supposed to do what he told me." "You thought wrong," Commissioner Johnson replied coldly. "Police officers swear an oath to protect and serve all citizens equally. You both broke that oath when you decided my nephew was guilty of being black with a nice car." Morrison finally found his voice. "Sir, we were just doing our jobs. Sometimes mistakes happen in police work." Commissioner Johnson stood up from his chair. He was tall and intimidating when he was angry. "Mistakes? You arrested an innocent man because you didn't think black people deserved to own expensive cars. You lied in your reports and tried to destroy his reputation. You committed crimes while wearing police badges." The commissioner walked around his desk and stood directly in front of the 2 officers. "I have reopened every case you two have worked on together. I have teams of investigators looking into every arrest you made, every report you filed, and every complaint that was ignored." Morrison's face turned red with anger. "You can't do this because of your nephew. That's not fair." "Fair?" Commissioner Johnson's voice got louder. "Was it fair when you arrested Marcus for walking to his own car? Was it fair when you lied to destroy his career? Was it fair when this department protected you instead of the innocent people you hurt?" Commissioner Johnson returned to his desk and picked up 2 envelopes. "Detective Morrison, Officer Phillips, you are both suspended without pay, effective immediately. Criminal charges will be filed against you by the end of the week." Phillips broke down completely, sobbing and begging for mercy. "Please, sir, I have a family. I need this job. I'll do anything to make this right." "You should have thought about your family before you decided to become a criminal," Commissioner Johnson replied. "Both of you, turn in your badges, your guns, and your police identification. Security will escort you from the building." As Morrison and Phillips were led away by security guards, word spread quickly through the police department. Commissioner Johnson was serious about cleaning house. Any officer who had covered up misconduct or participated in racist policing was going to be held accountable. Chief Robert Hayes, who had protected Morrison and Phillips for years, was called to the commissioner's office next. Hayes was an overweight man in his 50s who had spent more time playing politics than fighting crime. He had allowed corruption to spread through his department because it was easier than doing the right thing. "Chief Hayes," Commissioner Johnson said, "you knew about Morrison's pattern of misconduct, and you chose to ignore it. You failed in your duty to supervise your officers and protect the public." Hayes tried to defend himself. "Commissioner, we can't investigate every complaint. Sometimes people lie about police officers because they're angry about being arrested. 47 complaints against one officer, and you never investigated any of them?" Commissioner Johnson asked. "That is either criminal negligence or deliberate cover-up. Either way, you're finished." Hayes was fired that same day. Several other supervisors who had protected Morrison and Phillips were also removed from their positions. Commissioner Johnson made it clear that the culture of silence and protection for bad cops was over. The FBI investigation was moving forward. Quickly, federal agents had found evidence that Morrison and Phillips had violated the civil rights of at least 15 people over the past 5 years. They had planted evidence, lied in court, and targeted black men for harassment and false arrests. Marcus watched all of this happening from his home. Linda Carter called him every day with updates about the investigation. The charges against Morrison and Phillips were getting more serious as investigators found more evidence of their crimes. "Marcus, they're going to prison," Linda told him. During one phone call, the federal charges alone could get them 20 years each. Marcus felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. He was glad that justice was finally being served, but he was also sad that it had taken so long. How many other innocent people had been hurt by these officers before someone with power decided to stop them? Commissioner Johnson was working 18-hour days to reform the police department. He fired corrupt officers, promoted honest ones, and implemented new training programs about civil rights and community policing. He also created an independent oversight committee to investigate complaints against officers. The irony was not lost on anyone. Morrison and Phillips had arrested Marcus because they thought a black man didn't deserve to have power or success. Now, a black man had the ultimate power over their careers and their freedom. Justice had a sense of humor, even if it sometimes took a long time to arrive. 3 months had passed since Marcus's arrest. The case was moving slowly through the court system, and Marcus felt like his life was falling apart. He spent his days at home, unable to work, watching his savings get smaller as he paid legal bills. His friends started avoiding him because they had seen the news stories calling him a criminal. Linda Carter was still fighting for Marcus, but she was getting frustrated. Every time she asked for evidence from the police, they said they were too busy to help. When she requested Morrison and Phillips's personnel files, the police department said the files were confidential. The system seemed designed to protect the officers and hurt Marcus. And something unexpected happened. Linda got a phone call from Tony Rossi, the owner of the Italian restaurant where Marcus had been eating dinner. Tony's voice sounded nervous. On the phone. "Miss Carter, I need to talk to you about that night," Tony said quietly. "I have something that might help your client." Linda drove to the restaurant immediately. Tony met her at the back door, looking around to make sure nobody was watching. He was a short man in his 60s, with gray hair and worried eyes. "I didn't want to get involved," Tony explained as he led Linda to his office. "But I can't sleep at night knowing what really happened. Those police officers lied about everything." Tony sat down at his desk and turned on his computer. "We have security cameras outside the restaurant. They record everything that happens on the street. I saved the video from that night." Linda felt her heart start beating faster. This could be the evidence she needed to prove Marcus was innocent. Tony clicked on a video file, and the screen showed a clear view of the street outside the restaurant. "There," Tony said, pointing at the screen. "That's your client walking to his car." Linda watched the video carefully. She could see Marcus leaving the restaurant, walking calmly to his BMW, and reaching for his keys. He looked relaxed and happy. There was nothing suspicious about his behavior. Then the police car appeared on the screen. Morrison and Phillips got out and approached Marcus aggressively. Linda could see that Marcus was trying to cooperate, but the officers were treating him like a dangerous criminal from the very beginning. The most important part came next. The camera had recorded sound as well as video. Linda could hear Morrison talking to Phillips before they approached Marcus. "Look at this guy thinking he's better than us," Morrison's voice said clearly on the recording. "Black guy with a fancy car in this neighborhood. Probably a drug dealer or something worse." Phillips could be heard agreeing with his partner. "Yeah, something's definitely not right here." Linda felt sick listening to the racist comments. But she also felt excited because this recording proved that Morrison had decided to arrest Marcus before they even talked to him. The officers had no evidence of any crime. They were just angry that a black man owned an expensive car. The video showed the entire arrest. Marcus remained calm and polite throughout the encounter. He tried to show his identification and explained that the car belonged to him. The officers refused to listen and arrested him anyway. There was no violence from Marcus, no resisting arrest, and no obstruction of justice. "Mr. Rossi, this video proves Marcus is innocent," Linda said. "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" Tony looked ashamed. "My lawyer told me to stay out of it. He said getting involved with police cases could hurt my business. But I watched the news, and I saw those officers lying about what happened. I couldn't stay quiet anymore." Linda made copies of the video and rushed back to her office. She immediately called the district attorney's office and demanded a meeting. This time, she had evidence that couldn't be ignored. While Linda was preparing her legal strategy, something else was happening that would change everything. Marcus had been keeping a secret from almost everyone, including Linda. His uncle Samuel Johnson was a respected federal judge who had spent his career fighting for civil rights and police reform. Judge Samuel Johnson had been watching his nephew's case from a distance. As a judge, he couldn't get directly involved in the legal proceedings, but he was furious about what had happened to Marcus. Judge Johnson had seen too many cases like this one, where innocent black men were arrested by racist police officers. Most people didn't know was that Judge Johnson was being considered for a very important job. The mayor of Chicago was looking for a new police commissioner, someone who could clean up the department and restore public trust. Judge Johnson's name was at the top of the list of candidates. The mayor, Patricia Williams, was a black woman who had been elected on a promise to reform the police department. She had heard about Marcus's case and was disturbed by the reports of officer misconduct. When she learned that the victim was Judge Johnson's nephew, she realized this case could be the perfect opportunity to make a statement about police accountability. Meanwhile, Linda Carter was preparing to release the restaurant security video to the media. She knew that once the public saw the real story, there would be enormous pressure on the police department and the district attorney's office to do the right thing. The video went viral within hours of being posted online. People across the country watched in shock as they saw Morrison and Phillips arrest an innocent man based on nothing but racial prejudice. The racist comments from Morrison were particularly damaging. Civil rights organizations immediately called for the officers to be fired and prosecuted. Patricia Williams, the activist who had organized protests in Marcus's case, organized the largest demonstration Chicago had seen in years. Thousands of people marched through downtown, demanding justice for Marcus and accountability for Morrison and Phillips. The FBI had been quietly investigating the Chicago Police Department for months, looking into patterns of civil rights violations. Marcus's case, especially with the new video evidence, became a key part of their investigation. Federal agents began interviewing other people who had been arrested by Morrison and Phillips. They found a disturbing pattern. Morrison had been targeting black men for years, arresting them on false charges and writing fake reports. Phillips had been helping him cover up the crimes. Other officers in the department knew what was happening, but had stayed quiet to protect. Their careers. District Attorney William Hayes found himself in an impossible position. The video evidence made it clear that Morrison and Phillips had committed serious crimes. If Hayes continued to protect them, his own career would be destroyed. But if he prosecuted them, he would make enemies within the police department. Pressure became too much when the FBI announced they were opening a federal investigation into civil rights violations by the Chicago Police Department. Hayes knew he had to act quickly to save his own reputation. In a press conference that was broadcast live on television, Hayes announced that all charges against Marcus Johnson were being dropped immediately. He also announced that Morrison and Phillips were being investigated for perjury, false imprisonment, and civil rights violations. Marcus watched the press conference from his living room, hardly believing what he was hearing. After 3 months of hell, the truth was finally coming out. But he knew this was just the beginning. The real justice would come when Morrison and Phillips faced the consequences of their crimes. The police station was cold and smelled like cleaning supplies and old coffee. Marcus sat in a small cell with concrete walls and metal bars. His expensive suit was wrinkled, and his tie was loose around his neck. He had been there for 6 hours already, and nobody would tell him when he could leave. His hands still hurt from the tight handcuffs. There were red marks around his wrists that would take days to fade. Marcus kept thinking about what had happened. He had done nothing wrong, yet here he was, locked up like a real criminal. Detective Morrison was in the main office, typing his report on an old computer. He was making up lies as he typed. According to his report, Marcus had been acting strange near the BMW. Morrison wrote that Marcus had tried to break into the car and became violent when questioned. None of this was true, but Morrison had written false reports before. It was easy for him. Officer Phillips sat at the desk next to Morrison, writing his own report. He copied most of what Morrison had written. Phillips had learned that it was safer to agree with his partner than to tell the truth. Morrison was popular with the other officers, and Phillips didn't want to make enemies. The story hit the local news the next morning. Channel 7 News showed Morrison and Phillips standing outside the police station, talking to reporters. Both men wore clean uniforms and serious expressions on their faces. "We received reports of a suspicious person trying to break into vehicles," Morrison told the reporter. The camera lights made his badge shine. "When we approached the suspect, he became aggressive and refused to cooperate with our investigation." Phillips nodded along with everything Morrison said. "The suspect tried to fight us when we attempted to arrest him. We had no choice but to use handcuffs to protect ourselves and the public." The news reporter was a young woman named Kelly Adams. She wrote down everything the officers said without asking hard questions. The story that appeared on television that night made Marcus look like a dangerous criminal who had attacked 2 brave police officers. Marcus's phone had been taken away when he was arrested, so he couldn't call anyone. He asked the officers at the jail if he could make a phone call, but they ignored him. Hours passed slowly. Marcus had never felt so alone and scared in his life. Finally, after 18 long hours, a guard came to his cell. "Someone posted your bail. You're free to go." Marcus felt relief wash over him like cool water. His lawyer, Linda Carter, was waiting for him in the lobby. Linda was a smart woman in her 40s who had been fighting for people's rights for 20 years. She had short brown hair and kind eyes behind wire glasses. "Marcus, I'm so sorry this happened to you," Linda said as they walked out of the police station. "Your sister called me as soon as she saw the news. We're going to fight this." Outside, Marcus saw reporters waiting with cameras and microphones. They shouted questions at him, but Linda told him not to say anything. The camera flashes were bright and hurt his eyes. Marcus put his hand up to block the light as they hurried to Linda's car. The charges against Marcus were serious. Resisting, arrest and obstruction of justice could mean jail time and thousands of dollars in fines. Even worse, Marcus's boss at Meridian Financial Group had seen the news. The company dealt with people's money, so they couldn't have employees who might be criminals. Marcus's boss, Mr. Richard Stone, called him into his office the next day. Mr. Stone was a thin man with gray hair who always wore expensive suits. His office had large windows that looked out over the city. "Marcus, you know I like you," Mr. Stone said, not looking directly at him. "You're a good worker, and our clients trust you. But this situation with the police makes things difficult for the company." Marcus felt his heart sink. "Mr. Stone, I didn't do anything wrong. The charges are false. My lawyer says we can prove it." "I hope that's true," Mr. Stone replied. "But until this gets resolved, I have to put you on leave. It's company policy. I'm sorry." Marcus cleaned out his desk that afternoon. His coworkers stared at him as he packed his things into a cardboard box. Some of them had worked with him for years, but none of them said goodbye. They were afraid that being friendly with him might hurt their own careers. Linda Carter spent the next few weeks investigating the case. She discovered that Detective Morrison had a history of arresting black men for crimes they didn't commit. In the past 5 years, Morrison had arrested 15 black men on charges that were later dropped or dismissed. But each time, the police department had protected him. Phillips was different. He was younger and had a clean record before partnering with Morrison. But Linda found that Phillips had learned to follow Morrison's lead in everything. The younger officer was scared of Morrison and didn't want to make him angry. Linda tried to get the security camera footage from the restaurant where Marcus had been eating. The restaurant owner, Tony Rossi, was an older Italian man who had seen what really happened. He wanted to help Marcus, but his lawyer told him to stay out of it. Getting involved with police cases could be bad for business. The district attorney's office was supposed to decide whether to continue with the charges against Marcus. The district attorney was a man named William Hayes, who had worked closely with the police for many years. He didn't want to make the police department angry by dropping charges against Marcus. The officers seemed credible, District Attorney Hayes told Linda during a meeting in his office. They have good records and no reason to lie. Linda showed him information about Morrison's past arrests, but Hayes didn't want to listen. Those cases were different, he said. We can't assume Officer Morrison did anything wrong just because of old complaints. Marcus felt trapped. The system that was supposed to protect innocent people was working against him. The police had lied. The news had believed their lies. His company had abandoned him. And now the district attorney was refusing to drop false charges. At night, Marcus lay in bed thinking about his future. If he was convicted of these crimes, his career would be over. No financial company would hire him. His reputation would be destroyed forever. All because 2 police officers had decided he didn't deserve to own a nice car. Linda kept fighting, but progress was slow. She filed motions with the court, asking for the charges to be dropped. She wrote letters to the mayor and the police chief asking for an investigation. But the system moved slowly, and powerful people protected each other. Marcus began to understand something that many black men knew but hoped they would never experience. In America, being innocent was not enough. Sometimes the truth didn't matter. Sometimes the system failed, and innocent people paid the price for other people's prejudice. and lies. The summer heat made the streets of Chicago feel like an oven. It was Tuesday evening, and the sun was slowly going down behind the tall buildings. Detective Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he sat in the police car. His partner, Officer Danny Phillips, was driving slowly through the downtown area. Morrison had been a police officer for 15 years. He was a big man with gray hair and cold blue eyes. Many people in the neighborhood knew him, but not in a good way. He had a bad habit of stopping people without good reasons, especially black people. Danny Phillips was younger and had been working with Morrison for 2 years. Phillips looked up to Morrison and did whatever his older partner told him to do. The two men were looking for trouble. They always were. Morrison enjoyed showing his power, and Phillips followed along like a shadow. Their police car moved slowly past shops and restaurants. People on the sidewalks tried not to look at them directly. Marcus Johnson had just finished eating dinner at Tony's Italian restaurant. It was a nice place with white tablecloths and expensive wine. Marcus worked for a big company called Meridian Financial Group. He was good at his job and made a lot of money. At 32 years old, he had worked hard to get where he was. He wore a dark blue suit that fit him perfectly, and his shoes were shiny black leather dot. The dinner had gone well. Marcus had met with 3 clients who wanted to invest their money through his company. They liked Marcus because he was smart and honest. He had answered all their questions and explained everything clearly. By the end of the meal, they had agreed to do business with him. Marcus felt happy as he walked toward his car. His BMW was parked right outside the restaurant. It was a beautiful black car that he had bought 6 months ago. Marcus had saved money for years to buy it. The car was his pride and joy. He washed it every weekend and kept it in perfect condition. As Marcus reached into his pocket for his car keys, he noticed a police car driving slowly down the street. He didn't think much about it. Police cars were common in downtown Chicago. Marcus found his keys and pressed the button to unlock his car. The lights blinked, and he heard the familiar beep sound. Morrison saw the black man in the expensive suit walking toward the BMW. Something inside him got angry. He didn't like seeing black people with nice things. In his mind, they didn't deserve them. Morrison had grown up poor, and he was jealous of anyone who had more than him. But when that person was black, his jealousy turned into rage. "Look at this guy," Morrison said to Phillips, pointing at Marcus. "Nice car, expensive suit. Something's not right here." Phillips looked at Marcus. The young man seemed normal to him. He was well dressed and walking calmly to his car. But Phillips trusted Morrison's judgment. If Morrison thought something was wrong, then something must be wrong. "What do you think he did?" Phillips asked. "I don't know yet, but we're going to find out," Morrison replied. He told Phillips to pull over near the BMW. Marcus was about to open his car door when he heard car doors slamming behind him. He turned around and saw 2 police officers walking toward him quickly. Both men had their hands on their guns. Marcus felt confused and scared. "Put your hands on the car," Morrison ordered in a loud voice. Marcus was shocked. "Excuse me? Why?" "I haven't done anything wrong. I said put your hands on the car." "Now?" Morrison repeated, his voice getting louder. Marcus tried to stay calm. He had heard stories about situations like this. His father had taught him to be careful around police officers, especially white ones. "Officer, I think there's been a mistake. This is my car. I was just having dinner at the restaurant." Morrison stepped closer to Marcus. He was much bigger, and he used his size to scare people. "This car doesn't belong to you. Nobody's going to believe you can afford a car like this." "But it is my car," Marcus said. He slowly reached for his wallet. "I can show you my license and registration." Phillips quickly grabbed Marcus's wrist. "Don't reach for anything. Keep your hands where we can see them." Marcus felt panic rising in his chest. This was exactly what his father had warned him about. He was an innocent man, but these officers had already decided he was guilty of something. "Officers, please. I work for Meridian Financial Group. I'm the vice president there. I can prove this car belongs to me." Morrison laughed. It was not a nice laugh. "Sure you are. And I'm the mayor of Chicago." A few people walking by stopped to watch. Some of them took out their phones to record what was happening. Marcus hoped someone would help him, but nobody did. They just watched and whispered to each other. "Look, I have all my papers right here." "In my wallet," Marcus said, trying to sound calm. "My driver's license, my car registration, my business cards. Everything will show you that I'm telling the truth." Morrison didn't want to hear it. He had already made up his mind. In his experience, when you decided someone was guilty, you made sure they stayed guilty. Facts didn't matter. "Turn around and put your hands behind your back." "For what?" "What am I being arrested for?" Marcus asked. His voice was getting louder. "Because he was scared and frustrated." "Resisting arrest," Morrison said as he pulled out his handcuffs. "But you haven't told me why you're arresting me in the first place," Marcus replied. Phillips called for backup on his radio. Within 5 minutes, 2 more police cars arrived. Now there were 6 officers standing around Marcus and his BMW. The small crowd of people watching had grown bigger. Someone across the street was recording everything with a camera, but the officers didn't notice. Marcus felt helpless. He was a successful businessman who paid his taxes and followed the law. But none of that mattered now. These officers had decided he was a criminal, and there was nothing he could do to change their minds. Morrison snapped the handcuffs on Marcus's wrists. They were too tight and hurt his skin. "You're under arrest for resisting arrest and obstruction of justice." As they pushed Marcus into the back of the police car, he looked at his BMW one last time. The car that had made him so proud now felt like a curse. In Morrison's world, a black man with nice things was automatically suspicious. Marcus closed his eyes and tried not to cry as the police car drove away.